And I'd like to ask each of you to think about and answer the question. If you've noticed, we are putting likes under your answers. So the question is, what digital innovations are needed by Lithuania in order for it to become a leader in blue economy in the Baltic region? What digital innovations are needed? Just say what you think is needed. What is the biggest need? Who would like to start? Okay. The blue energy is related with water? No, blue energy is everything that is related to the sea, the shore, shipbuilding and tourism. I'll stimulate my colleagues. Blue energy and blue economy, what could be relevant to the Klaipėda region. In the coming session opened by the Vice Minister, we'll speak about offshore wind. This is going to be a big project that will generate a lot more energy than Lithuania needs. And what shall we do with the surplus energy if it doesn't feed into the system? Nobody needs it. The transport representatives said it already. We have to think about a hydrogen economy. In other words, surplus energy via hydrolysis, offshore or onshore, but definitely in the Klaipėda region, will be converted into hydrogen. And then hydrogen can be used in energy, in chemistry industry, or in transport. As I understand it, the digital innovations are needed in order to balance out the surplus. Electricity is peculiar in the sense that there has to be just the right amount of electricity in the network. And this entire system, via digital innovative solutions, will have to be managed. I believe that if Lithuania chooses this road, it would be innovative. It is worthwhile choosing this direction. Transport representatives say that they are very eager to have hydrogen. Okay, thank you. We've recorded that, Augustas. I hoped to be the last, but anyway. I was looking at you, waiting. Which one will you name? To answer the question directly, last weekend, Agri-Food Lietuva was organizing a hackathon named Digital Sea. It was devoted to solving different issues, and the teams you saw today were among the winners. So, briefly, what type of technologies are needed for the blue economy? Well, first of all, those that clean and preserve the sea, but also the technologies that help extract seaweed and plants and flora from the sea and transform it to some kind of fibers and create added value. But it's not about that. I believe that we need the digital innovations that could be used. We have an English term, Death Valley. When we have a big gap between the developers and users of a technology. And the issue is that most often technology developers either do not have realistic practical opportunities to test out what they are developing, or don't even communicate with the final beneficiary and do not test the technologies they develop. So statistically, about 70% of all the current innovations are not rooted in the market and do not become used. So my question would rather be not what digital innovations we need, but the Vice Minister mentioned this as well as other colleagues, whether the ecosystem, the sandbox, where we could create interactively and test the technologies according to the need on the market, be it the ministry or the port or the business. As Andrew said, The applications could be many, but the key thing is that companies develop things that could be applicable, because otherwise we will reinvent the wheel or we will send the money down the drain, even if it's institutional money. I would not like to see that. There is a book, Competing Against the Luck, where the author says that you can even forecast innovations if we know that these innovations are first of all focused on somebody's need. Thank you very much. Now, Daina, Edmundas. Rytis, I'm thinking about what the leader is. How could it be defined? Where they create the most added value in this area. But this added value could not only be measured in money, but also it is a social value, and it is becoming ever more important. And the most important innovations are those that help solve the problems of the majority of the population, that are relevant to the majority of people, and that help solve their key issues. And what are our key issues? They're most often related with security, the pandemic, climate change, as well as many other aspects that are not that much about money. You don't think about money there because there is a risk of dying. So I believe that environmental problems are the most relevant ones. And we could show the leadership here. Thank you very much, Edmundas. Thank you. It's very good to be the last speaker because colleagues have already said everything. I'm not left with much. From what I've heard in this conference, where we're speaking about blue economy, and this means more or less the sea region, the city mayor is most concerned about the port and the logistics. We heard the Minister of the Environment. Some stevedoring companies are good and some are less good. The environment is our headache number one currently. I fully agree with Daina. Environmental innovations are our priority number one. And myself being a professional in one area, I would add that they should be focused into most polluting and most complex activity, and that is at the same time most useful to Lithuania, logistics. Thank you very much. Let me begin our discussion from the questions as to how to connect the specific potential beneficiaries with the innovators, with scientists. Maybe we could use digital innovation hubs for that. How do you envisage the process? People who have problems, and these problems could be changed by innovations. How could the two sides be brought together? Well, in terms of digital innovation hubs, let us put an example in order to unify the terminology. So digital innovation hub is like an equivalent of a pharmacy, which means that we, as people who come to a pharmacy, most often do not have the competence to define which active ingredient or which prescription we need, but we enumerate our symptoms, and an experienced and qualified pharmacist, based on the symptoms felt by person, identifies what type of drug or complex of drugs are necessary to make the person feel better. So a digital innovation hub is like a digital pharmacy, and I believe that its main role is to use its ecosystem of technology developers, scientists, organizations, to create a prescription to solve, to alleviate the symptoms enumerated by the state, a company or business or an organization, in order to make us live a bluer life or greener life. But as I said at my introductory speech, neither Lithuanian nor Greek nor Croatian colleagues, Justinas also has his own digital innovation hub. We know that an organization alone cannot make a miracle. I started by saying that we have to cooperate. It should be inoculated into our blood. This is not even a golden triangle, but rather a circle. When we all have common goals, or each organization helps the other, the state helps business, the business helps science, the science helps the population, and then this cooperation and digital innovation hubs become powerful to engage in digitization, whereas we as Lithuanians, as many other nations, prefer to choose the individualistic path. Maybe I'm too negative. It's not always like this. And we have many examples of cooperation in Lithuania as well, but I believe that there are too few of them. Daina. One person once said that probably Lithuanians have had their cooperation gene operated out. I believe that this is a very important function of these centers. I believe that not only expert consultations are important, but I would believe it's important that the hubs would engage in the role of business intelligence. They should engage in broad networking, international networking. They should encourage companies and clients to export those innovations, because innovations are worth nothing if we cannot sell them on the international market. Because as you know, in Lithuania, we have the ratio between export and GDP. But for that, we have to engage in international networking. On the other side, we need to be the radars observing and monitoring what's happening around the world. Virgilijus.
Pavyzdžiais pasiremsiu jau, kuriais remiausi, bet gal pakcentuosiu, Rytį. Tai iš tokių sėkmės istorijų, tai vėlgi tas pats fintechas.
Fintech could be a success story. Why was it successful in Lithuania despite of all the deviations? Because there was a need. We had a very monopolistic sector and something needed to be done. We had the tools, but we lacked the courage. We had to take the risks and to face the truth. And a group of enthusiasts from the central bank just said, okay, let's take and do it. Let's don't complain anymore. There are technological solutions. Let us create the conditions for young people, technologists, engineers, and programmers to do it. Or in green energy. We are leaders in the region. We have implemented innovative solutions. People come to us from Germany and other countries to learn from us. Why have we been successful? Because we don't have our own generation. And in order to implement generation, we had no other option but to be green energy. And by doing this, by understanding this, we simply did that. In other words, we need to have a strategic diligence and discipline, but we need to risk, because we have to admit that if we have 10 innovation projects, 9 will be rejected, but 1 will prevail. So this is just the starting point. We have to dare to risk. and to respect risks and tolerate them. Of course, we need to be courageous. We have to go and try. But what about specific beneficiaries, SMEs, for example? Somebody said that 50% of farmers are small farmers that could need innovations, but they are not aware that they need those innovations. They don't understand this. So if I understand Augustas' idea correctly, they could go to digital innovation hubs. Yes. Digital technologies are needed by no one. Full stop. People do not need technologies. We do not need radio frequency transmitted via Bluetooth. We need to have a phone to call, to write, to read. We need solutions that make our lives easier, because from times immemorial, each innovation has been born because people are lazy. And each day we want to live more comfortably and healthier. So innovations make our lives easier. Farmers don't need digital technologies, but if they help them save 10% of fertilizers or to reduce the use of pesticides or fungicides, this becomes relevant. And if digital technologies are needed for that, then yes, okay, it's fine. So let us not focus on this. This is just a means to an end. Let's think about how we can improve people's life in businesses and at home. This is one thing. The next thing is, as Daina said, Lithuania needs exporting because we're small but smart, so we can create. So it's not that bad. But I think that we always should consider energotechs and fintechs, but also agri-food techs and agrotechs. I think that I'm an expert in this field. I've been working here for 15 years, and there is not a single country in the world that presents and brands itself as agri-food sandbox or aquatech sandbox. So these brands are free, but I was taking Marcos, the head of the European Digital Hub Center, from Vilnius. They said that in Europe, they do not create aquatech technologies. So we, being small and smart, could go to other regions and to help create solutions for them. So we have the potential for cooperation. Yes, everything starts and ends with cooperation. The aim of digital innovation hubs should be networking, not only while exporting, but also importing ideas. By filtering the best, most suitable ideas, how to make it more attractive to businesses. By definition, implementation of progressive technologies helps create competitive advantage. Everybody wants to have a competitive advantage. If some of the businesses at least start using it, their competitors or collaborators will choose the same road. Additionally, there is a fear that some innovations are expensive, therefore it is dangerous to be the first. And here I believe that this fear is ungrounded as well. If you want to be a leader, you have to know how to be a leader. And you quoted Kennedy, and the consequences of Kennedy's statement was that, yes, man was brought to the moon, but do you remember his name? Armstrong, but what was the other one? Who was the other one? Aldrin. He came out 2 minutes later and nobody knows his name. He was the second. So in order to be competitive, you have to know that those who are the first are the winners. And the one who was in the ship waiting for them to come back, probably his name is also not remembered. There was another guy, he was on the ship. Yes, thank you very much, Daina. Another angle, because today we have many representatives of the public sector. And while listening and observing, I have an impression that the public sector says that, okay, it's the business that has to do it, and the business says that, no, they have to do it. So who should be assumed the leadership? In terms of the biggest breakthrough innovations, they are all comes as need from the public sector. Super glue, microwave, have emerged from the military industry. It was necessary for the US military. In Lithuania, you mentioned the fintech example. So who created the fintech sandbox? The key market regulator did it. If the Bank of Lithuania hadn't assumed the leadership, nothing would have happened. So we are very happy that last year we managed to to set up an innovation center and finance it, and with the venture capital funds from the Ministry of Defense. And I'm happy to hear it. But let me say that the key responsibility should fall on the shoulders of the public sector and their need to have their needs and the appetite for the innovations. You said that the risks are too high sometimes, but businesses will not take those risks alone. There has to be a balance between business and public sector. We have the money. Like the saying goes, why do you need money if you don't have imagination? So I believe that the public sector has to be clearer about their needs and to focus on them more, because that is the starting point. I am interested in what gives you hope that the leadership that Augustas talked about as well is possible. For example, in Lithuania, we are not that strong in innovation competitiveness. What gives you hope that this is possible? Some politicians keep repeating an unpleasant truth that until Europe tells us to, we don't do anything. So in terms of innovations and the wave of money, the RRF funds, there a big share is foreseen for innovations. So if we don't invest into the public sector, Brussels will tell us to.
We have a systemic problem on a yearly basis. We are lacking behind in Europe according to the investments of the private and public sector into innovations. Well, that depends upon the year we have in mind. In this area, we shouldn't fear the risk. We shouldn't fear keeping the course for a long time, because maybe now we can turn the question upside down, because sometimes a window opens for innovations, and the funds may look for innovators and they find them. We always have to have the long-term strategy that there will be money for innovations, and there will be long-term investors. We need to have strategic investments. Kęstutis, how did people vote? What can we show on the screen to summarize our discussion? Which of the statements looked the most attractive to them? Okay, the wind and the use of energy potential seem to be the most attractive point. Okay, to summarize, what would you like to say to reflect on that? It is very important to lay the bridge between those who fund and those who are digital investment centers. Okay, so I will reflect upon lagging behind in terms of technology investments. I believe that this is not correct because we have the levers, but we do not use it. And companies do not declare their investments. We do that because we know how to do that, but this is why we create innovations, because this is our business. If we take the European arena, I believe that Lithuania is a very strong and aggressive player, and the way we are moving forward and what we have completed in the last 7 years is a lot. And I liked one comment, which is absolutely not related to digitalization, but we spoke about real estate prices in our sea area, and people said that in Palanga, real estate costs the same as in Southern Europe. And another one said, why is Lithuania worse than Southern Europe? And we still have the dogma in ourselves that we have to look forward to the West and aspire for being Western, but we need to reach out for the better. And I'm not speaking only about myself. The experiences that are being bought from us, and there are companies that from Lithuania that create the value, they export by 100%, and we are strong. This is what we have. Daina, what would you add? I would like to summarize that the final user of innovations and the beneficiary is the society, and the public sector has to ensure the platform where innovation system participants should have as many transactions so that they can create the value. DICs and digital innovation centers carry out the function. Of course, we would like to see the innovation centers to have clearer specialization and better defined functions and the accountability, so that the value can be measured and that the practices can be scaled out on a wider basis. But what I would like to say that the strong role of the public sector could be empowerment via the regulation environment, but we also have to have the appetite for innovations, the need for that. I support colleague Daina, because I also think, and especially in the early parts of the value chain, that the public sector is extremely important. We remember the energy and the fraction of deep rocks. And when you trace back how much the state actually invested in the area of innovations and science and research, so we have achieved a lot in this area. The public sector has to keep course and be disciplined regarding many years. On the other hand, we spoke about electromobiles, and why don't we have charging stations with all state authorities? Why don't we have renovated buildings with solar panels on the roof? We have to keep it simple, and in that way we will be able to solve many more good questions. I see our time is coming to an end. To finish up, in order to implement the innovations, the public sector needs to take the leadership, and the private sector has to learn another theory, that it's not the strongest who remain, but those who are able to share. Thank you, the panelists.